Happy Monday, everybody. Rhori Johnston here on News Channel 5 Plus for another live open line where we open our phones to you, the viewers, and you can share your comments, your questions, your concerns. 737 Plus as we talk about education in Tennessee amid this strange 2020 year that we have had and how the pandemic has affected schooling. We saw it during the spring semester. Now, as we are basically in the summer months, schools are trying to figure out what are they going to do in the fall and how are they going to do it with less money, perhaps. So we've got a lot to talk about, and we want to welcome our guest today. Amanda Kail is with us, and I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. And she is the president of the local MNEA, the Metro Nashville Education Association, also a teacher with Metro Nashville Public Schools. And our friend Andy Spears is back with us from the Tennessee Education Report. Andy, good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I know very few school districts around Tennessee have issued guidelines as to how they plan to reopen in the fall. A number of other districts say it's just not possible yet to figure this out because of the numbers and just there's so many moving parts. Where do you both stand right now? What are your hopes and aspirations for this fall semester? And we'll start with you, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you. You're right. There is an awful lot of unknowns. And so trying to figure out what the answer is when we have such a moving target is difficult. I think, however, for us, as far as, educators are concerned, we have a couple of concerns. First and foremost, that whatever is decided is safe. A lot of people talk about how students are often, asymptomatic, or, the younger generation isn't hit as hard by the virus. But that doesn't take into account who the people working in the schools are. Right. We have quite a few people who would be much more susceptible. And so first and foremost, we want to make sure whatever plan happens is safe. And I think the second thing we want to make sure is that it is equitable. And what I mean by that is that if we have to do something online, or if we have to do some sort of hybrid kind of thing where we're combining in person or at home, or even if we are going back, that we understand that this recent situation has not impacted all of our students, all of our families equally. Right. And there will be a lot of needs that need to be addressed. And, as we think about, if students are back in schools, will they be wearing masks? Will they be expected to maintain social distancing? Those of you who have spent any time at all with children will know that those are not things that come easy to them. But in all seriousness, I think it's really important that we don't, that we're very careful that we're maintaining a safe environment, but that we're also not going to be unduly harsh on students who are not able to maintain that. There's a lot of talk right now about racial justice, and we're always cognizant of the school to prison pipeline, and I don't want to see students suffering undue consequences because they took off their mask because they're a kid and not because they're trying to do anything particularly bad. So those are all just things, as far as what my best case scenario, it's hard to describe, but I would say it's whatever meets those goals.
All right, Andy, what are your thoughts as we're now, hard to believe, but wrapping up the month of June, heading into July?
Yeah, so I have, my daughter is 14. She should be a freshman in high school in the fall. And I remember being a freshman, I was frightened. I wore a pink shirt and gray slacks, and it was horrifying. I want her to have the complete high school experience. I'm not sure that's possible. I'm just not. I definitely do not want to hear that my daughter has COVID and is sick. Right. I don't want to hear that she visited her grandfather and then got COVID and then was infected other kids. So that's a whole different scenario from the really weird, really awkward 14-year-old kid who walked into a building in 1989. Yeah, I went to high school in 1989. So that's a different experience. And I want her to have the high school experience. I want her to be with her friends, and she wants to be with her friends. And she's texting them, and they're FaceTiming, and that's technology that didn't exist when I was a kid. So that's great. I want her to have the whole high school experience. And Amanda, I know Amanda wants her kids to have that experience. I also don't want any kids to be sick. I don't want, my wife is a teacher, I don't want her to get sick. So every day, my daughter and my wife go to school, and I don't want them to be sick. So I want safety is absolutely number one. So that's a huge question mark for me. Of what does that look like? I don't know what that looks like.
Well, I
know what high school looked like when I was in 1989. I know what it looks like every single year. My wife has been a teacher. My daughter is 14. I want her to have a normal high school experience. I want that because that's just what's normal for me. But I also don't want her to get sick.
Right. Reality tells us, and I've got one in college and one in high school, and this past spring kind of proved that, and for those high school seniors this past spring, how unfair it was for them.
Yes.
That they missed out on so many rites of passage for a senior in high school, proms and graduation ceremonies and whatnot. I know that some of these communities have tried hard. These districts have put together task forces with parents and teachers, administrators, community members. They're trying to follow CDC guidelines. But again, as you said, Amanda, it is a moving target. How close do you think we have to be before big decisions are made? And you said also there are more needs. What about money? Let's talk about that, Amanda.
Yeah, I mean, that's the elephant in the room, right? So we have a year where we are going into, we're not really sure what we're going into. MNPS does have those task forces. I am on those task forces. We have educators on those task forces as well as other employee representatives. And that's, I think, the most important thing, because we have to make it work. Whatever the plan is, it can sound great, but for those people who have actually worked in the classroom, there's a lot of ideas that people have that sound great. But when you actually, try to implement something with actual real students, it can be a lot more complicated than what people realize. And so we've got to make sure that we have educators at the table to make those things happen. We don't have the funding that we need. Before COVID, school bathrooms often don't have soap. That's just a real basic thing. Teachers, we get a little bit of money from the state every year for school supplies. We can't, one of the things not covered by that are any cleaning supplies. And so by and large, cleaning supplies in most of our schools, we have some schools that are fortunate enough, I think, to have the kind of parents who have the money and the resources to supply those things. But by and large, in a lot of our schools, teachers buy those things. And I think when we're talking about going back and having plans that work, if our plans that work are that teachers will continue to buy hand sanitizer and Clorox wipes, and if we're thinking about the increased needs of, for example, masks, as a classroom teacher myself, I can tell you how long those masks, if we give them to students, they're not going to last real long, and we'll have to keep supplying them. There's just a lot of needs there. If we need to have smaller class sizes, do we have the staff to make that work? We don't.
Right.
I'm just going to be honest. We don't. And, our city is, we just passed a budget, and we were able to get a little bit more money for the schools, which I am grateful for. And I don't take for granted at all in this very difficult economic time. But it's nowhere near what we need. And so, it's going to be really tough, and I think that we're going to have to pull together as a city and as a state, and even as a country, as we look at schools going back, and think about really what are our priorities. If we have limited resources, what are we going to spend them on? And I think that public education is it's a way that we directly support 86,000 kids in this city and their families. And I think I may be biased, but I think that's a pretty good priority to have.
All right. With that, we're going to take our first break. We got a lot more to talk to and tell our viewers 737 plus. We'll ask our viewers too, if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, call in. We'd love to hear from you. What are your concerns as we start planning for a potential reopening of schools this fall? Open Line will be right back.